The Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave. I am your host, and I've also brought a guest speaker here today. His name's Greg.
Yep.
Hey, Greg, what's up?
Hey, Dave, if that's even you.
This is me, Dave, the host of Unconventional Therapist's Guide to Nothing.
Sure about that?
That's always been the way it is, Greg.
All right. Well, let me run you through a little scenario here, Dave. Imagine you're on your way home to, you've had this long day, you're at work, and you're expecting to come home and meet with your loved one, your spouse, your mother, whoever, it doesn't matter, right? But when you get there, you see someone that you don't recognize. But this person you don't recognize, they're wearing the same clothes as your loved one. They're looking at you and they're smiling as if nothing is wrong at all. Pretty creepy scenario, right? So we've talked about the unease of imposter syndrome. Now imagine what it would feel like if you were the only one that you thought was real and the people that you cared about all around you, they were imposters. It's a creepy concept, right?
Sure.
And this is a syndrome that some people are suffering with, and it's called Capgras syndrome. And that's what we're talking about today.
Looking like Capgras, it's actually Capgras.
That's right, because it's French, and we're both French.
Capgras, right? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds good. So what is this thing? It's a form of misidentification syndrome. It's when a person sees a spouse, a friend, a parent, someone very close to them. It could even be a pet or a place. And this person, place, or thing has been replaced by an identical imposter. And we're going to go into this further because I don't know if that's painting the exact picture of what's going on here. But there was this psychiatrist, French psychiatrist, pretty early on in psychiatry. I mean, he's practicing in the early 1920s. So just a little bit before the guys that we care so much about, Freud, Jung. But he had this patient, and she complained that doubles, quote unquote, had replaced her husband and her children and other people in her life. Doppelgangers is what they're thinking at the time, right? Which is like this, there's mythology around these things. They're harbingers of bad luck. They're evil twins. They're your alter ego that exists in the world. Like, what's your experience with doppelgangers? I'm sure with your history of horror and all those things like this, you must have come across this phenomenon, right?
I had somebody tell me that they met my doppelganger. And
was it Bam Margera? Because
no.
I'm like, you look like a young Bam Margera. I have to specify.
I don't know that I like that, but all right.
I'm talking about prime time Bam.
Okay. Still.
Okay.
All right. No, and also there is a cartoon on Disney Plus, and people say I look like the lead of that cartoon.
Really?
And it's a newer one. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I think it's like I can't remember. Actually.
I don't think people never tell me my lookalikes because I don't think they want to hurt my feelings. Although if I had to pick, I would say I'm like a Gosling DiCaprio type.
No,
not at all.
Not even.
Well, I mean, when I was young, maybe.
No,
so listen,
never.
The Dr. Capgras.
Oh wait, Strange World. Have you heard of it?
Yes, it's a movie.
Yeah, people say I look like the lead in that movie.
I mean, I'm confused because he's a cartoon and it's hard to. I guess that's a compliment.
I'm not gonna lie. I watched part of it just to see what they were talking about, and I think it's pretty spot on.
Beautiful drawing. I think that's probably true. So listen, initially they called this thing the illusion, like it's an illusion of lookalikes this poor woman was suffering with. And similar to face blindness, which has, it's prosopagnosia. That's what, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. This is all kind of uncharted territory for us, I think. But face blindness is this thing where sufferers are unable to recognize faces. But what's interesting about that, and in this very specific scenario with Capgras syndrome, say you were face to face with the person and they were talking with you you would have this like sense of unease and be like, this isn't the person, this is an imposter. But if you left their room and just heard their voice, or if you even talked to them on the phone, you would be able to communicate them and believe that it was them. So there's something really interesting going on there.
Okay. So when in 1923, when Capgras
Mhm.
described it in the newspaper, do you know the term that they used?
Yeah, it's a French word, French term, right?
Yeah, it was like, hmm,
You're gonna go
do
for it. That's why I left it
I
alone.
illusion des sauces.
That's not
Sau-
bad.
not not sausage, just so everyone knows. I did not say the word sausage in there. The illusion of lookalikes is what
Mhm.
it translates to, as you could obviously tell. So that's what it initially was thought to be, and it was initially regarded as a psychiatric disorder that was connected to hysteria and seen as it was seen predominantly in females. But in I think it was 19, I might be wrong about this. Was it the 1980s? They started to identify there was actually like these brain lesions on the patients that had Capgras
Well, yeah,
syndromes.
it's gonna be later on because they're not gonna see that for a while, right? Yeah, so lesions, damage to the brain, and those are the kinds of things that are gonna create this problem. And
So
we'll talk
now it's
about
kind
why
of
that is.
yeah, now it's kind of looked at as both a psychiatric and a neurological disorder. Um,
Well, the thing was, Freud, this is the time when they're figuring this stuff out. This is like the 30s. This is kind of coming into, understanding. And that's Freud's area. So he's thinking, oh, is this some kind of like Oedipus thing and which kind of, in a sense, like, because Freud is with understanding that we're all, we want to sleep with their mothers kind of thing. And he's thinking, all right, well, maybe you're having this delusion to get rid of the guilt that you want to sleep with your mother. You're looking at this person saying, oh, that's not even my mother. I can feel free to do that now. So that kind of makes sense. But I think, as time goes on, a lot of this stuff gets dispelled. It's not all about repressed sexual energy. And maybe that was just something that was going on with Freud that he was kind of projecting on everyone else in a sense. But I think like we can't like just dismiss his claims, but a lot of times it's a little bit much, I think.
I think in this case we can
I think in this case we probably can,
though.
yes.
He's definitely wrong.
Yeah. But you know what's interesting? So Capra, and when I say that, I mean the person, he called this a delusion of emotion. So Dave, there's an emotional arousal we get when we see someone we know. Like when I see your face, I see you, and my brain says, okay, it's Dave. I'm happy to see you. And this is all happening unconsciously. Like I see your face and I get this emotional response, right? So there's this circuit between our vision and our memory and our emotion. And with Capgras syndrome, that's damaged somewhere. So with the syndrome, I'll see you like I would see Dave. I recognize you, but I don't have this appropriate emotional response. So I'm left
Yeah.
feeling something isn't quite right, almost kind of like an uncanny valley type look to you, right?
Right, right. So the thing that's happening here, there's two central parts of the brain that are being affected. So we have the central nervous system, which is the part that scans the features of the face, and
Mm-hmm.
then the extended nervous system, which relays the emotional information about the face and gives us that feeling that we get, right? So
Right.
somewhere in between those two systems, something's damaged or there's a break in the system of translation, right? Of communication between those two
Which when you're
systems.
saying lesions, they're seeing lesions. It's like there's just literally maybe it's a car accident, maybe it's a traumatic brain injury, but
Right.
you can just have this injury and that would cause this like rift in this visual processing, emotion, and memory kind of loop, causing this weird brain malfunction to happen, which becomes very scary.
Yeah. So, and the other thing with the lesions is the lesion doesn't actually have to be on the part that directly is related to all this. It could actually be on another part that's just like an extension or has something to do with that part of the brain, which is probably what makes it even more challenging at first for them to have initially like diagnosed it if they didn't actually see a lesion like on the part of the brain
Right. That makes
that
sense.
you know what I mean? So that was probably a little something that they had to eventually connect dots on to determine like, oh wait, everybody seems to have a lesion on the brain that has this.
It's really scary how you can get a tumor or an injury, and then all of a sudden your emotions are changed. You don't, isn't it kind of scary to think like you can bump your head in a sense, and I'm obviously being hyperbolic, and then you don't, and then I don't know you anymore?
Or it's not that you don't know me. It's that
You've been
you
replaced.
don't believe that I am the version of me that I say I am. So like
Which,
you do know me, you just don't believe that the present me that's in front of you is that me.
yeah,
It's
like what have you done with Dave?
so you know what's funny when you were communicating about this topic to me and the way you framed it made it seem like it was like this science fiction
Mhm.
story and I was like but I actually watched a YouTube clip of somebody with Capgras syndrome and it was way less suspicious. And that shined a whole new light on it to me than the way that you had portrayed it. And not to say that your portrayal is wrong, because I'm sure that there are people that also have it in the paranoia realm of it. But he was like, "Oh, you would really like my mom. She's a lot like you." And I was
Oh
like,
yeah,
that to me. Well, first, it's sad. Obviously,
it's
the
very
whole thing is
sad.
very sad. But it's like, oh wait, no, it's not even. It's not even in like a fear response. It's like, no, I just see you as something different.
You're bringing up a good point. There was this one instance too where this kid, I say kid, he's probably like, a teenager. Um, he had it so intensely that he thought he himself was replaced. And so when he was talking to his mother, he said, "Hey, when the real me comes back, like, are you guys still gonna like me? Are you still gonna allow me to be around here?" So think about the anxiety and the confusion that that person's going through in the
Yeah,
moment. That's
yeah.
so scary and sad.
So
You're right. It is very sad.
and you just brought up a great point. It doesn't have to just be like a loved one. It could also be distant people from that person. It doesn't have to be like someone directly surrounding them. Pets, their pet could be an imposter to them, or it could even be objects, which I think is fascinating because I would love to hear more examples of how that is played out.
Maybe like Dave be like, "This isn't my Ouija board. This
Wait,
is a Ouija board, but it's not
but
my Ouija
it's
board."
definitely not mine.
Or like
It's
even you go into like you're in your house and you're like, "This is very strange. Like I know this looks like my house, but this isn't my house. Something feels emotional, like that emotion." So he's right. It's interesting that Capra, without any scans or anything like that, he kind of thought, "Hey, this is a delusion of emotions." I think
yeah,
that's
yeah,
exactly kind of what this is here.
right. And it can come in the forms of acute, transient, and chronic forms. So there's different ways it can be experienced. And some people, in some of their cases, they even feel like there's been like time has been warped or substituted. So there's all these different ways that this diagnosis or this syndrome can be experienced, I should say. And also, just of note, this is actually not within the DSM-5
Hmm.
as it's because of the rarity of it. Instead, it's captured as like persecutory or unspecified delusion types. That would
Yeah,
be how
so
they
I think
would
that the
categorize.
persecutory delusion works because it's almost as if someone's playing a trick on you.
Yeah,
So it is sort of, it does fit into that paranoia kind of theme. But you know what's interesting too is you can't really throw it in, like these people aren't psychotic. So it's not the kind of
right.
thing where I think what makes it really scary is you're having this very specific delusion, but the rest of your life is kind of really practical and rational. So that's what makes it really scary. You're like, no, no, I'm not crazy. You're just not you.
Yeah.
Like,
And you know what highlights that? I guess previously it was considered to be a syndrome that made people violent, but now it's kind of known by experts of the syndrome that it's very rare actually. That's more of a rare case for them to be violent. But you know what I wonder is I wonder if the reason why they thought that is because that was when it was most like treated.
mhm.
If someone was having a violent outburst because they felt like the people surrounding them weren't real or it's kind of like the thing like you don't get help for something unless it becomes a problem, right?
Right.
So if somebody was just feeling like things were off or that people were fake, they probably got kind of previous day pushed aside or called
Or they didn't
crazy,
say anything.
or they didn't say anything, or they were just called psychotic and they were hospitalized.
Dave, do you know that OCD? A lot of people don't know this. It's kind of my area, but OCD is the 7th most debilitating illness in the world. So now I'm not saying it's the 7th most debilitating mental illness. I'm saying it's the 7th most debilitating illness.
Yeah.
And the reason why people aren't it's not because it's not treatable. It's very treatable. But the thing is, it's the shame and you don't want to tell people what's going on in your mind. And this, I think, would be the same thing. Like, oh, it's so rare. Yeah, because people don't really feel comfortable saying, look, I go home, I see my wife, and I know it's not her. Because in every other way, they're rational. So it's really hard for you to go somewhere and tell someone that, because you're like, if I tell someone that, they're going to put me away. It feels like. And for a long time, that's what definitely would have happened.
And also, here's another note. And Greg, thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that. That sounded a lot like something my friend Greg would have said. So it's interesting that you shared that. Did you know that like this is most common in people with neurodegenerative conditions like dementia?
Yeah.
And I think, you know what? How much of it probably just gets chalked up to, hey, that's dementia.
Mm-hmm.
They don't remember me, or they think, I can almost imagine a large population of people, not that there's a large population of people with this, but if there were, them almost being brushed aside because of other things they have going on.
Right.
So up to 16% of those with Lewy body dementia, which I had never heard of, and I was actually found it kind of interesting to hear about this type of dementia. It's like a combination of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So you get the memory issues that you typically would see in Alzheimer's, but then you get like the body and movement mobility issues that you get with Parkinson's. Sounds very difficult, very sad.
Yeah.
And then
I think that's
you have
what
this.
I think that's what you're talking about right there, that illness. I think that's what Robin Williams came down with and what ended up, causing his suicide.
Wasn't he just Parkinson's or no?
No, I think it was Lewy body. I think it was.
Interesting.
So yeah, and
I think that we are actually at some point kind of due for a dementia episode, because that's actually become something that I've become sort of familiar with, just like not typical, but like just plain dementia and Alzheimer's. And now discovering this, I was like, wow, there's actually so much more out there that I'm not familiar with. And I think that would be pretty interesting to dig into. But yeah, just that to me, hearing that stat, hearing, memory losses and like ability to identify is already such a prominent issue with Alzheimer's and dementia. So if someone had Capgras syndrome, how would you even know?
Right. It's when the people are young and everything else seems to
Sure.
there's no other symptoms, and then it's just strictly Capgras. That's why it's so rare. That's why when you notice it, and the person's willing to talk about it.
Right.
It's interesting you bring up dementia though, because I remember like there's been dementia in my family, both sides. My grandmother. I remember my grandmother would be calling my son. My son Jack, you know him very well. They would be calling him Greg. She would be calling him Greg, and I would think to myself, like, if she thinks he's Greg, I wonder who the hell she thinks I am. Like, she must be so uncomfortable right now.
Well, the interesting thing is so much of it doesn't always align that way, though, or doesn't add up. So because I also experienced it with my grandmother as well, and there was large periods of time where there was only one family member or two that she would even be able to identify. And I was not usually one of them. I visited once, and she goes, "Who are you?" And she saw my name tag said visitor. She was a visitor. I'm like, "Yup," and that was good enough. But she
and then you're just
like
crushed though, because it's like grandma.
Oh, it's devastating, and you try to make the best of it and you play along with it. But it's such a tough thing. So imagine for a younger individual that's going through this, or even if it is an older individual and you're close to them, and suddenly they're accusing you of not being you, it's got to be really challenging for those individuals
and extremely isolating. Like, I'm losing my mind here. I'm losing my mind.
There's a few. So aside from Lewy body dementia, taking up about 16% of those cases, or 16% of the cases of Lewy body also having Capgras, I think is the stat. It's also more likely in people with other brain conditions like Parkinson's, epilepsy, people who have had a stroke, traumatic brain injury, as you mentioned before, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. Again, schizophrenia, another one where it probably seems more like a schizophrenia symptom rather than something on top of schizophrenia, because we've all heard stories about people being paranoid or suspicious when they have schizophrenia. So one research estimate, it said that individuals with schizophrenia and dementia make up 81% of the cases of Capgras syndrome. So that's like beyond majority right there.
That's staggering. But what's going on with dementia or Alzheimer's? Isn't it like the slow breakdown, deterioration of your brain function?
Exactly. Yeah. Because
you hit
we
that
know
wrong
that
spot.
And we know that with schizophrenia, that's like connected to Parkinson's in kind of like an opposite direction of what is it with dopamine?
So too much dopamine.
So yeah.
Right. Yeah. And
so it kind of makes sense how Parkinson's, schizophrenia are both like linked here. And then obviously dementia makes a lot of sense as far as this goes.
So like too much dopamine would be, schizophrenia, not enough would be Alzheimer's. So it's like, or dopamine in the wrong areas of the brain. It's just so interesting how just the slightest miscalculation in your brain can really throw things way out of whack.
So we know degeneration, obviously, but with schizophrenia and Parkinson's, are we thinking that it's something about the way the dopamine is being distributed that throws it off, or is there also degeneration of the brain in both of those?
Yeah, no, so it could just be the way it's interacting with that visual memory and that
those nervous
circuit we were talking about.
Yeah,
and I wonder if with schizophrenia, if you were on antipsychotics, would that relieve the symptoms of Capgras? Or would the Capgras stay?
So actually, in a little while, I'll talk about treatment and I'll get into that as far as medication goes.
Okay. So you want to talk about some symptoms here, David?
Yeah. I know we nailed, obviously, the big ones. I actually think we basically
those are the symptoms, right?
Yeah.
You think your loved one's replaced by an imposter. Those are the symptoms. That's the symptoms.
Pretty much. Yep. So we got all those. The causes, as far as we said, here's the thing though, it sounds like there's still a lot that needs to be determined. Like this is something that's so rare that it's not like an everyday thing that people are able to kind of take a look at. And as far as they know, it just seems to be some kind of breakdown in those nervous systems and information being relayed.
All right. Do you want me to like run down some of these related disorders before you get into the treatments? All right. I thought there's a few misidentification disorders that we could talk about really quick. And I'll just go through these kind of quick. I just thought they were pretty interesting. So Frigoli that was this guy who was, what he was? He was a quick change artist.
Oh, Mike Frigoli?
Yeah.
From around the block?
No. Like when the other time I remember seeing it is on like America's Got Talent, where people would get behind something and then they would change their clothes in a second. You know what I'm talking about? They do it I'm sure they do it in concerts, and Taylor Swift's doing this kind of thing. She next thing you know, she's wearing something different. Anyways,
what do you call them? Models, runway models.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. So what this disorder entails is that, the various people you meet are the same person, but in disguise. This is more paranoia, persecutory. Think about it like this. You feel like someone's stalking you and you know what they look like, but then you go to the police and you're like, well, that's them right there. It's just that they're wearing a wig, or they've disguised themselves somehow. They're able to change to different people. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty scary. Another is inner metamorphosis. And this is the belief that the person, this might be what you're talking about more with dementia and stuff like that. So they can assume the form of another person pretty quickly. So, my grandmother with me, or I remember my grandfather would maybe his sister, when we were all around, he'd be like, oh, that's my sister. And it just wouldn't be at all. It's this really sad thing where you're actually seeing the other person, but inside. So it's like someone will be looking at you and seeing someone completely different.
Yeah.
That's sort of interesting, right? So subjective doubles is this belief that there's another copy of you. So there's another Dave out there, but just carrying out independent actions, living this life that's almost the antithesis of what you're doing. He's like doing things to kind of ruin your progress.
Oh, just to spite me.
Yes.
I
And it
hate
is
that
you.
guy. I
And
hate
it's-
that guy though.
And think about how easy it would be for him because he's just you walking around getting you
Just
into
without
trouble.
walking around without a care.
And that's where I think that like the doppelganger thing is pretty scary. This idea that there's an exact replica of you out there just doing these things.
You and the use of the word scary.
So I know. Let go of Halloween. I know it's Thanksgiving now. So there's this mirrored misidentification, and this is I hate to say it, it's scary, but
Boy.
it's when you're looking in the mirror and you're seeing another person. Now that's something.
How do you know you're not? I think about that all the time, Greg.
When you're looking in the mirror and you're like,
Does everyone see this exact same image that I see?
well, that's getting pretty
Because if
deep.
so, why am I not famous yet? Ay, ay, ay.
How have they made a cartoon about me? Oh, they did.
Oh, wait.
All right, I'll just do one more because I know you're actually I'm gonna do two more because I found one specifically for you. But
Oh, boy.
actually, these are both kind of for you. So this is Cotard syndrome, and this is the belief that you're dead and you're decaying and you've lost all your blood and you're putrefying, you're rotting.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting, right?
Well, the
And-
fact that they thought they lost all their blood, that reminded me of the Dracula killer and how he thought his blood dried up.
He probably had this.
Yeah.
We should let someone know.
Wait, you got it all wrong. Oh, wait, he still did terrible, terrible things.
Yeah, he's the worst. Let's not worry about that.
Yeah, we weren't suggesting anything. We were just wanting to know.
Clinical lycanthropy. So turning into an animal.
You weren't
right?
supposed to mention this one. This was for our Halloween episode next year.
Oh wow, okay, my fault. To be continued.
That's a spooky diagnosis, Greg.
That is a spooky diagnosis. You're right. So what do you want to do? Causes, or we want to talk about some pop culture? Because I think somehow this is all over pop culture. If
All
you
right.
look
Hold
for it.
off on pop culture because
right.
I know we'll get into that. Let's do some boring stuff first.
Okay.
So let me see where to start. All right. Risks. You can so aside from this being associated with other things like dementia and Parkinson's can also, I think they can result from it, or there's a risk of it co-occurring. Some people develop it after large amounts of recreational drug use or alcohol use. Health issues like low thyroid or another metabolic condition or nutrient deficiency like being short on vitamin B12 is possible as well. Diagnosing, kind of boring as well. But in order to get it diagnosed, you should have a doctor do a physical mental health exam on you. They might order some mental skills testing to check for dementia or other conditions. They might do some brain imaging like MRI, EEG to look for lesions on the brain or anything like that. They should also talk to your family members to learn about when the delusion started and get other details. That's all.
So can I say something there?
Yeah, of course.
Drug use in almost every. Listen. I'm not trying to be, everyone's dad or whatever, but
Well,
we
you are a dad to like a lot of people, though.
I'm a lot of people's dad, and as a lot of people's dad, I want you to know, using drugs, as fun as they can be, is a very dangerous thing. And look, you can damage your brain.
That was the dorkiest thing.
I'm sorry.
As
I'm
fun
not
as they
trying to
could be, guys. I don't want to take away from your fun.
And it's true. I don't like even, marijuana when you're too young. I hate to say it. I hate to say it, but if your brain's still developing, stay away. If not, what are you going to do?
Next thing he's going to do is tell us to not do mushrooms. Yikes.
No, I won't.
Take away all of our fun.
All I'm going to say is listen, think of the risks. Even mushrooms, if you have some kind of dormant schizophrenia or, you're some vulnerability to psychosis, you could be unleashing that. Who knows? Unless you're
Unleash the beast.
Unleash the beast. And if that's something you're into, you're willing to let go. Maybe you have less to worry about. But I just be careful with the more nasty drugs because I think that's how you really damage your brain.
Yeah,
not so much
careful.
The psychedelics.
Yeah, just mostly like the cracks,
the heroines, and the cocaines. Stay away from that.
All those things. Treatment. All right. So, as promised, here we are. Some dementia drugs may reduce symptoms, and antipsychotic medications may ease the delusions and the agitation. Antidepressants have also helped in some cases as well. So it sounds like a lot of different drugs can be effective or helpful. Here's the thing, you're not curing this thing.
No.
So that's not our goal. Our goal is more for symptom management, I think you would say. There are also surgeries I've heard of if like something like there's damage to the brain and stuff like that. I don't know about all that. Therapy is suggested for the patient, but not just the patient, their loved ones as well. Because the first thing, and like I just know this from my work with individuals with dementia, the first thing that we talk about with dementia individuals is also caretaker fatigue and ensuring that the caretakers, the family, if it's paid workers, whatever, are also, talking to people and making sure that they're not burning out. Because there's a high tolerance for burnout, I guess, would be in that kind of field. So I think the same would go for this. There's different types of therapy, Greg. I didn't know if you saw any of this. So I thought this was kind of interesting. Habilitation therapy involves loved ones trying to put themselves in the patient's place to better understand what they're feeling. So it's kind of like building empathy.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming the reason for that is probably there's a lot of frustration and anger, or also not believing initially, like thinking it's intentional. So it's about helping them understand like this is a real disease and what's happening to them. Validation therapy gives the patient a sense of safety if they are scared and the imposter is there to hurt them. So it talks to them about whatever it is that they're afraid of and helps them just understand that they're still safe. Reality orientation therapy. So that's typically for dementia individuals and involves continuously orienting the person in their reality, including time, place, and the people around them. People may help better. It may help people better understand their surroundings and feel less anxiety. And then behavior therapy is about gently discussing the false beliefs while pointing out the evidence in favor and against them. So I like that because when we do evidence with patients and especially like CBT, I don't just tell them all the evidence against what they're telling me. I also tell them, we try to highlight evidence that validates what they're saying. Because it's more believable if you look at it that way.
The good form of, I don't know where I saw this, but there's another behavior therapy is, you got to remember, so you can call somebody with Capgras and they'll know it's you. So if it's just the voice, because that's not part of that circuit, like the hearing isn't part of that visual memory, emotional circuit. So if you can kind of maybe talk and then like expose the person to you talking, and then you come in the room and they're going to go, off, right? They're going to think that, oh no, I've been deceived. But if you can kind of find a way to work with that, where you're talking, where you're using that one piece that you have, if you can use that to kind of, break down the wall of like, hey, you can hear my voice, and then maybe keep talking as you walk into the room or something, where you can kind of maybe reveal to the person. It's almost like Socratic questioning, like if this is my voice here and I continue to talk and now I'm in front of you, shouldn't it be logical that this is me, right? Maybe there's some kind of behavioral therapy in that way, but I think over time that wouldn't work because that piece is just completely missing, and you're always gonna, because it happens every single time. It's like starting over every single time you see the person.
So and that's an important thing to remember. So the worst thing you can do is try to convince the person with Capgras that they're mistaken, that what they're telling, what they're saying to be true is not true, because this is just going to cause more distress for them, and then it's going to cause conflict between you and that person. So which is, exactly the same with dementia. You don't tell, or even psychosis, you don't tell somebody what they're experiencing is wrong. You help them try to come to realizations that they're safe. That's always the most important thing. Second, try to show evidence or ground them in the reality and try to show evidence to, demonstrate that, maybe what they're seeing isn't true. And then validate that, you understand that they must be scared or, whatever it is that they're feeling.
Yeah, you
Another
don't have to
thing,
deny their you don't have to deny their
no, and
delusions. You can
that just
just kind of
causes, escalation.
I'm
And
here. Yeah, that must be hard for you. Or
Yep.
kind of like find something that they're saying that you can kind of glom onto and say, oh yeah, this kind of makes sense, and go that road. Kind of like redirect. But
Yeah.
you don't need to, deny someone's delusions, because that is just going to make them feel a lot,
Yep.
a lot worse.
The thing to remember is that the condition is, it's an actual condition that's causing the false belief. It's not a conscious choice. And, a lot of what you can utilize with it is the same as if you've ever, worked or been around someone with dementia. You can, set a soothing environment, use calm approaches when you're talking to them, use distraction, kind of distract them to something more positive. And like we said before, sometimes it can be temporary. So then, hopefully you can reorient them into the reality, or, just try to use it as a distraction away from whatever it is that's distressing them, and try to get, direct them to something more positive.
Yeah. Yeah. Pop culture?
Sure.
All right, listen, I've got some stuff here. I think that Jordan Peele has been on the Capgras train, or he's doing something where he's definitely looking at mental health and saying, like, how can I kind of like make something, horrifying with this? You've seen Us. That is, it's almost like, I guess before we get into that, it's like, because this is a horrifying idea. Like, if this is true, like, I think that somewhere there was a case where a family had a child kidnapped, and then whatever came back, it wasn't their kid. Like, they thought it was their kid, but it wasn't. It was just this other kid who was, maybe, exploiting the situation or something. I don't really know. But isn't that like a horrifying situation where, like, what if this person's right, you know? And that's what's going on in the movie Us, where it's like every single person has a double out there.
Yeah.
Underground somehow.
Yeah. Back in Twin Peaks, there's the Black Lodge, where there's like this doppelganger of each one of us that exists in there. And sometimes you'd get that vision of the Black Lodge, and you see this evil version of another person. And, I think the thing to me is, like, I do view doppelgangers as something different, because this is the idea that, I don't know, it's more ingrained in like what's in the present. Like, a doppelganger is almost to me like this idea there's somebody else out there. I get it. It's like a second version of you. And you're saying it's like it's switched, and that's now who's in front of them.
Yeah.
But this is like, to me, I was like hearing,
I just mean in that person's experience, though.
yeah. So it's like, but it's like, it's not even their doppelganger. It's like something else completely, right?
It's like their soul is missing.
Yeah, there's something off about them that doesn't make it whoever that person is, right?
Yeah. Which is scary. And
Yeah.
that movie, The Truman Show, that's kind of, everyone's sort of an imposter in that. I guess I'm taking it from the position of the sufferer, like what it must be like for them.
Yeah.
That feeling that everyone's just slightly off.
Well,
Like,
I mean,
even,
isn't that like most people's biggest fear? Isn't
hey,
that like
listen,
kind of in everything almost?
yeah. Like, it's Exorcist. I mean, because that person, their soul is gone. There's something else there. That's like super scary. Pet Cemetery, when the people come back, there's something, it's them. I see them. I recognize them. The facial recognition software in our brains is doing that thing where it's like, hey, that's Dave, but it's not. There's you can, it's almost like you can see when someone's soul is gone. And I don't know if you've ever, not to get like really morbid here, but if you've ever been to a wake or something like that, you look at someone and you're like, yeah, that's them, but like,
It's not
obviously,
Yeah.
it feels like something's missing there. It's really like a scary thing.
Or They Live. You ever see They Live? Roddy Piper. He puts on the
Yeah,
sunglasses, and he can see that some people are actually aliens.
it's funny. A good friend of mine just recommended that movie to me again. He's like, you have to see. It's like John Carpenter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen it, but
Wow.
what about Smile? Like, you were big into that. Isn't that sort of the same thing where she was seeing people and there was something just off about them now because they were smiling?
Yeah, now we're taking it very broad though.
I know, but you're right though. There's a reason why we have the Seven Deadly Sins episode, and and fraud was the most dead, like, in the category of one of the worst sins, right? The
Yeah.
deceiving, the spots,
So I guess where I was going, because I see what you're saying with like the idea that these people, like, there's just, but like with doppelgangers and stuff like that, this to me is more like that, like what you just identified here with that, or even like the wake. You're seeing somebody, but there's just this feeling that there's something that makes them not who they're portraying themselves to be.
yeah,
It's not even like a doppelganger. It's like, no, this is a fraud. This
like
is
a
not.
changeling.
It's like if you were looking at your wife and you're like, but that's not my wife
Yeah.
because I know my wife and that's not her. And you can't even like really identify why it's not her.
You know what's that you're really kind of doing something kind of beautiful here? What we're talking about here is there's a connection that's deeper than looks, and sometimes we forget that. We're in a very like aesthetically pleasing society, and our emotional connection is way more important than our looks, and that's what this is sort of telling you.
Yeah.
Like hey, look, you look exactly like you. That's who you are. You're my wife. You're still a beautiful woman and all these things, but your essence is gone, and that's what made you important.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of
Yeah.
powerful,
See,
isn't it?
and that's what I think is both sad and also, I guess, eerie about this is it's not like a sci-fi or horror movie. It's this idea that they're not able to connect to whatever that was
Mm.
that about that person that made them feel connected. So it's scary to them, or maybe it's not. Maybe they're just like, oh, that's just not you. Like I said, I saw that YouTube video. The guy was not scared, and he's driving with his dad, and he goes, "I know you're not. My dad drives much faster than this." And like, just little things. He was like just picking up on little things that he was trying to like, it was almost like trying to make a case of why this
I
isn't.
might have seen that. And was there a thing with his mother? And he was like, my mother cooks better than you, or
Yeah. Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or yeah, exactly. That was it. And he was very calm. And to the point where I was like, is this real? Because this isn't what even I would have expected. Uh but
But they had like a lot of money and resources,
yeah,
and were sort of able to handle that situation a lot better.
right. Yeah. Imagine now not having money and not having resources and then having this.
Did you see the thing where the son murdered his mother because he was so close with his mother, he loved his mother so much, but then someone replaced his mother, and he did what he thought was appropriate, and killed the imposter, and he went to trial and was cleared, reasons of insanity because of this thing. So I mean, it's shown
There's
up
also an actor who is a Canadian actor, but I guess he was on SNL. I can't remember what the name was now. Tony Rosario or Rotario or something like that. So I guess I don't know why I kind of skimmed this and didn't really have enough time to give this the due diligence. But now that we're just bringing this up, that might also. I couldn't find too many notable people who had this. His name came up in there, and there was something he was on trial for too. But then he was diagnosed with this as well. So that's kind of a lackluster story. But if anyone wants to actually look into it, there are some stories of people in cases with this. So it's a rather fascinating thing.
It really is. I find it interesting. I find all the misidentification syndrome stuff really fascinating, but also, like you said, really sad. It's that missing that connection, and I don't know. It's so. Do you lose it with everyone? And do you? So it makes it specific that the people that you're close with, you lose that connection. You lose that ability to see them as who they are.
But that's what's unclear to me, because I did read that
you
it also
develop
could be
new relationships.
Well, I also read that it could be with distant people as well. So this would have to be something we'd have to see more cases of to kind of see exactly how this plays out on a broader scale. And you're right. Yeah, that'd be a good question. Can you have new relationships?
Yeah, interesting. All right. Well, you got anything else on this?
Not really. I just think for me, and I don't know if this is the case for everybody, but I have a hard time with stuff like this because of that experience I've had with Alzheimer's. So for me, it was harder to like put a fun spin on this because
Yeah, no,
it's
I get it.
like, um, yeah, and like currently working with individuals still with Alzheimer's, and then my own personal experience with it. It was harder for me to be like, oh yeah, this is a fun spooky thing. It's more like, no, this stuff sucks.
Yeah,
um,
no, you're right, Dave. Because both sides of my family, and you
yeah,
know, my my grandmother on my mother's side, who I was super close with, she was one of the most hysterical people ever, and it took that from her.
yes,
It kind of made her. It's just so sad because it's like, do you want someone to last long enough to where the things that made them who they are disappear? And I think that's like, we brought up Robin Williams, and I think that's why, like, he was noticing that his personality was disappearing. And if you're Robin Williams and you're losing your personality, it's like that's the most important thing in the world to you. That's the most
mhm,
important thing in the world to a lot of people.
yeah,
And not noticing or not recognizing these people that you've made connections with for half a century or longer, and just having them, that connection be completely gone, it's really insidious, and it's probably one of the worst. Like, forgetting, that's so sad. Like, just forgetting.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and obviously we always think of dementia, Alzheimer's, all those things in the realm of older individuals. But obviously, there's early onset dementia, which is tragic as well. And obviously, we're mentioning cases of this with younger people. And I think it's yeah, it's tough to think about because that is rather tragic for someone who's
Extremely
got
frustrating for the person suffering, and then the family members. And I just, well, I can only speak to, and it was much worse for other people, but just being, young, maybe like, a teenager, and having had these like great moments sitting around laughing, like literally laughing for like hours, telling these awesome stories is what she would do. And you would come in, and then someone to not know you, you're like, you don't know me? Like, what
yeah,
do you mean you don't know
yeah,
me?
exactly.
You know,
Yeah,
it's
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 it's a tough thing. So, and then like I said earlier, with when it comes to caring for individuals with these things, it is important for people to also seek help themselves because it is something that can be a lot to go through.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of something that I'm currently doing with the some of the people at my profession where, we're working with individuals with Alzheimer's and trying to help them, the people that are working directly with them, understand that they got to take care of themselves as well as the person that they're taking care of because of how taxing it can be and how frustrating it can be at times. That can be a challenge because a lot of people go into it. They're like, "Oh, I can do this. I'm strong. I just want to help." But it's like you got to realize it all takes a toll on you. So,
Very taxing. Yeah. I said I
yeah,
didn't know that you worked with patients with Alzheimer's.
it's been more recently, but like our population's getting old. So, at that job that I work with individuals with disabilities, there's a lot of individuals who are getting older. And that's been just kind of something that I've, started to get interested in is doing some training on dementia and Alzheimer's and how to work with those individuals. So
Well,
it's a lot of it's fun, but again, it's can be taxing.
so what do you do if you notice someone, slipping a little bit, or they're trying or struggling to remember, or getting really frustrated? Like, how do you sort of shift that?
Distraction, jokes.
Yeah.
That's I'm big on using humor.
I look, me too. I think, you're well suited for that. And the humor, listen, it really is the
So
best medicine.
it really is. But you know what? Like you had mentioned with your grandmother, mine also was just very funny, very silly. We used to use humor all the time. And then one day she like snapped at me and I was like, whoa, she's never had snapped at
Mhm.
me. And she did. And I was like, damn. That was the day I was like, the first day I was like, all right, yeah, she's kind of a different person, unfortunately. That was probably one of the hardest days. Like for someone who've never seen a mean bone in her body suddenly like snapping at me, I was like, damn. I had to take a step back. So I think those are the moments where it's like the hardest for family members and people close to the individuals to, kind of navigate through, because it is so off-putting when you're seeing characteristics of the person that's just not who they are. So that's tough.
Yeah, like they're yeah, that is so
Yeah, you
hard.
literally see like personality changes, and that's
What does that say about? It's almost like this damage on your brain, or this degeneration, or if it's from a trauma or something like that, that has implications on your soul.
Yeah.
And depending on how you look at that, like, what does that mean? Like, it's literally changed who you are. Like, what is that? That's just such a
I think,
heavy topic.
Yeah, it's brain changes. It's functions in the brain changing, like maybe your amygdala is firing a little faster than normal, and your emotional regulation is kind of off balanced, and so many things going on. This is a significantly larger topic than we should be taking on at the very end of this episode.
Yeah, you're right.
But I think it kind of highlights that, hey, maybe there's a lot more in this realm that we need to be discussing. So I'm sure we'll be getting into some future episodes on this stuff.
Yeah.
For people who find this interesting. And if you don't, then don't worry. We always mix it up anyway.
So Dave, hopefully you're prepared. God knows I'm not, but I think a shout out is in order.
A shout out is definitely in order. So I'm going to do my best, as I always try, to pronounce things. I think this is Kellen Guillen. I hope I said that wrong. We want to give you a huge shout out for being.
Wait, you hope you said that wrong?
Did I say that?
Yeah.
I hope I said that right.
There you go.
It's a shout out. Will we purposely say the name wrong just to say it wrong? But they are a subscriber on our subscriber page, which is on Buzzsprout, for anybody who is interested in supporting us and helping us continue to bring all the content that you want, all the study guides you need, all that good stuff. Yeah, we really, really would love for anybody to subscribe and show support. We'll give a shout out. We'll also take episode requests and anything else. I'm sure we'll think of more stuff we want to add into that down the road. But for now, it's pretty fresh, and we have our first subscriber, and we are super pumped. So thank you so much, Kellen.
And we hope our friend had a nice, safe trip to Barcelona.
We were being played while someone was listening, driving to Barcelona.
I mean, we were in the car on the way to Barcelona. There's something beautiful about that.
Damn, dude. All of our hair was blown in the wind.
My mustache was blown in the wind.
So yeah, very exciting stuff. Very exciting. Ultimately, thank you so much. The support, the listens, the feedback, everything has just meant the world to us. Honestly, like, it's been this past month, I would say, has been so incredibly exciting and humbling, and it's just a lot. It's a lot. I can't even really express how cool this last month has been, as far as like the reach out that we've gotten and just the different things. So we appreciate it so much.
We do. And keep it coming, because it's all the motivation we need.
Yeah,
like,
literally.
We don't need to make money, or we don't need to do anything like that. We just reaching out, like a friendly word, maybe a question or a topic request, whatever. It just all means so much, and we appreciate it.
Yeah. And I will say that, just so people understand, when we, pitch something like a subscriber thing, I mean, I'm down the road. Obviously, we will take some of our catalog, which is pretty big now. We'll take probably a chunk of it and, kind of offload it and leave that available only to subscribers. I think that will come at some point. But the bigger goal for the subscription thing is to just give us some extra funds to help us do things like run ads and other things that help us continue to grow this podcast to make it what we envision it becoming. Because I think both of us have an idea of it in our head of where it's going to go. And, while it's been a great journey so far, I think we still feel that there's room for us both to grow in this. So That's
And maybe
kind of
one day we
our-
don't both have to have multiple jobs in a podcast. That would might be nice.
Imagine that. Imagine we don't have to carve out chunks of time just to do the research for these
I know.
topics and then scramble to get our notes together and then
It's honestly the
Record
research
super late.
literally never ends. We start today.
Yeah,
And
tomorrow morning I will wake up and be researching as soon as I get up our next week topic. It's literally nonstop. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much. Have a great Thanksgiving, because I think our next episode will be after Thanksgiving. Obviously, that's this week. So have a great, safe, and happy Thanksgiving. If you celebrate, if you don't, whatever you're doing, be safe and be happy and be everything you can be, because we believe in you. Good night, everybody. Have fun. Be safe. Don't do anything I wouldn't do, and do everything that Greg wouldn't do. See you later.